All right, now, yesterday you would have been aware, and I talked about it this morning just quietly, that the government announced the end of the COVID mandates. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins, Health Minister Alicia Verrall, announced essentially the official end of COVID yesterday and of the restrictions that apply. I'm not sure necessarily that all the restrictions have gone. Indeed, I have had a number of emails this morning or a number of texts this morning from people who say, well, my wife still can't work in the health sector. So there's still mandates that are applying there. And there are 3,250 people who have died from COVID. Another 20 died last week, as I pointed out. And half of all the new people were reinfected. So I have to say, the vax isn't working quite like we were told it would, even though we went and got it. But there you go. But how we are going to go forward on this particular issue, what's going to happen next, what a national ACT party and how they would approach the COVID issue, particularly around mandates, but also I'm just thinking particularly around policies at all, whether or not there are likely to be any further restrictions in any of the sectors, whether or not they pick up Professor Michael Baker's advice this morning that, God, you need to keep an eye on it or not. Let's go and talk to David Seymour now, the ACT Party leader and also the health spokesperson. I didn't realise you were the health spokesperson, David. Did you want that job?
No, I didn't realise that either, Michael. Brooke Van Velden's our
That's what I said. I said that. Yeah. That's exactly what I said to Hugh Barlow. But he ex-Radio New Zealand, he said, no, it's you.
Well, he might be a bit confused because I was the COVID-19 spokesperson all through the pandemic, and I guess that kind of merged into health eventually.
Oh, okay. So are you still the spokesperson for COVID, or did you give that to Brooke?
Well, not really. I mean, I just do finance these days. As far as I'm concerned, COVID's over. Although we do pop our head up occasionally just to point out the insanity of still having these 7-day isolation periods. You know, the main effect of that is that it gave certain staff members a cast iron excuse for a week off work. Yeah. And I just think when you look at what small business people have been facing for the last 3 or 4 years, being under assault from the government's COVID restrictions, the general regulations the government puts on business, and just some choppy times, you know, globally and locally in the economy. Last thing they needed. So Good thing that's gone. We've been saying it should be gone since I think somewhere around mid-2022, but, you know, the government's not always quick to take ACT's advice, unfortunately.
There are still employment mandates in some particular industries, though, David. Would you carry on with that? Were you guys elected?
No, I mean, it's just nuts. In fairness to the government, it's not an official government policy. It's some employers, and I think some of those employers are government agencies. But
that's right.
Look, I think the approach that ACT's taken through this whole thing is that, and we were saying this, as early as mid-2020, that the response to COVID should be proportionate to the risk. I think there are a lot of people who said, it's all a hoax, there is no risk. I don't think that was quite true. There were people who said it's the end of the world, there's no price that is too great to pay. That was clearly untrue. We're still paying the price in many ways. But we always said, look, that the response should be proportionate to the risk. So if you weigh it up now, does having been vaccinated in late 2021 or early 2022, maybe boosted in mid-2022, is that remotely relevant to your immunity level, given that it fades? Today, given that the virus has mutated many, many times, it would be a bit like mandating that you had to have the 2021 flu jab if you can work in 2023. I mean, no one seriously suggests something like that. I think it was wrong when people said that COVID is just a bad flu. In the early days, it was more virulent. But the latest variants, that's largely true. We wouldn't mandate that someone had to have a flu jab to go to work, so why on earth would anyone think it was a good idea now?
No, fair enough. Okay, that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting, I guess, about that too is you talked about, there is currently a commission or a kind of inquiry that was set up by the government to look into whether or not the public sector acted or made the right decisions with really an eye for future policy should there ever be a pandemic that strikes New Zealand. That isn't due to report back until, I think the middle of next year, David. Have you had a look at that
right.
and come to a conclusion that it's likely to have a predetermined outcome?
Well, I don't want to say that because, let me just take a step back. A Royal Commission of Inquiry has been a very valuable tool in New Zealand's constitutional framework. And if you think about what Justice Mann did around Erebus, the orchestrated litany of lies, sometimes it's really important that there's somebody in this community that you can go to and rely on that can be an honest broker. And I don't want to play any part in eroding Royal Commissions. However, unfortunately, I think in this case, Labor has really done the damage. They have put in place a Royal Commission that, first of all, will not be led by a judge, which has been the tradition.
Yep.
It'll be led by an epidemiologist by the name of Tony Blakely from Melbourne, who's by and large in favour of the, lock them out, lock them down approach that the government took. And then he's got, Hekia Parada and somebody else on there. So I'm not convinced they've got the right people on there. Second of all, I look at the terms of reference, and it's all about how effective the government's response was at suppressing the virus. But that's not actually the goal.
Agreed.
The goal is to optimise human welfare and perhaps consider some other things like human freedom and the ability to make silly decisions if you'd like to, which I think is an underrated freedom in the modern world. And so when I look at this situation, I think, well, is this Royal Commission going to assess and answer the right question? And they haven't been asked the right question. I think that's hugely unfortunate. I don't know if it's the right thing for a new government to come in and say, well, we're changing your terms of reference, because again, like I said, I don't want to be seen to undermine a Royal Commission. I don't want to get engaged in political interference in Royal Commissions. I think that would be a bad thing to do too. However, what is clear is that so far as ACT's concerned, we would have a very different approach to testing, tracing, rules of the game, vaccine policy, all of that stuff. We're on the record. We produced a total of 4 fairly comprehensive policy papers throughout the COVID period where we showed how it could have been done in a risk-proportionate way. Had our advice been followed, we wouldn't have borrowed so much money. We wouldn't have had, I don't believe, the protest. We wouldn't have the division and angst that's come out of the COVID response, but we would have got about the same result as they did.
Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying in terms of not doing the sort of the legal right thing. But given the deficiencies in the terms of reference and the issues that you raise around, I guess, education, the consequences upon education, employment, freedom, business, social cohesion, MIQ, etc., they don't look like they're going to be handled in any degree, shape or form. In the terms of reference that I've looked at, David, you obviously think the same thing as well. Don't you really need to amend them to make sure that you're not wasting money on what is, at the end of the day, as you say, just from the membership of the Royal Commission of Inquiry, it would seem a predetermined outcome?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I agree with that. The only thing I'd say is that I think for the government to change and then say, one government gives a Royal Commission of Inquiry one set of questions, another government comes in, changes the questions, it really does reinforce that idea that Royal Commissions are just there to get answers for whatever government's in power. That would be damaging to what I pointed out before, and I think you agree, is an important constitutional tool. So, look, all I'm saying is I think it might actually be better to let it run. Nobody's going to take it particularly seriously, and then say, well, actually, and we have said this is how we would have done it better and differently. Then have a new government come in and say, right, new paymaster, different rules, different answers, please. That will seriously undermine the whole thing too. So look, that's the only thing I would say, is that I don't think it's as simple as, yeah, they've screwed up, so we're going to do the same thing. That's sort of, letting them drag us down to their level and beat us with experience.
All right. Now, going forward, one of the things that's remarkable to me, I have never seen it to this level before, is the level of party unity across all of the parties, nobody breaking ranks. You've got a whole series of first-term MPs who've never seen this pressure before, but they've been in Parliament for the last 3 years. The discipline's been remarkable, but it's also true of the other parties as well to a good degree. What do you put that down to?
Well, it certainly hasn't been true of the other parties. You've had Te Pāti Maori with various issues around funding and donations. The Greens have had an MP actually fall out and jump ship, and at one point they tried to throw their own leader overboard. Labour are just an absolute train wreck, and the Nats have finally stabilised after they got their, I think, fourth leader in about 18 months. I'm not sure that the other parties have been that stable lately. I'm proud of the way ACT has conducted itself, and frankly, I think it comes down to having a clear purpose. We each have a piece of paper, an A4, that says we're in the business of representation, hearing people's concerns and putting forward better policies to solve those concerns. And once you know what your core business is, then it's easier to focus on getting the job done. And the other part of that is that we're not there to serve just any concerns or any solutions. We're generally there to serve people who are more on the we want greater personal freedom, less government regulation and tax, more free enterprise and civil society, rather than the other lot who basically want the government to play a bigger role.
Okay. I guess, though, it's a very interesting place 2 months out from election where you are. I don't think, ever polled where you are at the moment. You are in an amazing position, and that polling has stayed pretty stable. It's not just up and down. You are heading for the best result ever in the history of the ACT Party, should the polls at their current rating continue. I'm interested in your strategy, David. Is the idea to maximise the amount of votes that ACT can get, so that when you go into inevitable coalition, should you win with the National Party, you have that proportion of seats around the cabinet table?
Well, first of all, thank you, but I'm worried you're trying to jinx us by counting our chickens. There's still 60 days to go. Look, we are proud of the number of people getting behind ACT. We'd like a lot more people to do so. We think that we've got a good set of ideas, and we think that we're the ones that can deliver real change rather than, swapping Chris for Chris and red for blue and so on. I think we've got a good story to tell there. But what do we do with this? Well, the first thing I'd say, you go back to that sense of mission. It's representation, it's better public policy, it's policy for people who want less government, more personal freedom, more personal responsibility. So do we get that by taking ministerial seats, and do they have to be proportional to the number of votes we get, and do I have to be Deputy Prime Minister or Finance Minister? Well, maybe that would help to be close to the centre of government. But equally, if you see that as your goal, then you end up selling yourself cheap because you just want the baubles. And once you've got the baubles, then you're effectively on the team, and it's very hard to distinguish yourself, as I'm sure you will know from personal experience. Now, our view is that we're happy to fill the roles, and I think that if you look at the current government and the shortage of skills that it's got, I think that ACT will almost be needed to provide some ministers. But we're not going to sell out for the baubles and let down our supporters for a couple of reasons. One, life's just too short to give up your life, your privacy and your weekends so that you can implement bad policy. If I wanted to implement bad policy, I'd do it to a country I don't like. I wouldn't do it to New Zealand. Second of all, it's not politically sustainable. So if you get seduced by the baubles and you don't deliver for the people that bought the ticket for you to be there, then you find that you're out of Parliament after a term, and we're not so keen on that. And I guess finally, I personally want to see an ACT party that outlives me. I'm not here to be a politician for my whole life. That sounds tragic. I just want to be able to go home and see New Zealand as a better place and have someone to vote for that shares my values. So I'm not going anywhere in the next couple of years, probably not for the next couple of elections, but that's my long-term goal. Now, you put all of that together, and I know it's a lengthy answer to a simple question, but I think it's really important to point out that we're not here to get positions for politicians. We're here to secure policies for people. And that's, I think, part of the reason why more people are getting behind ACT, because that's a little different from what others have offered in the past.
I understand that, but you've got a chance, it seems to me, historic, since the formation of ACT at this coming election, to redefine the relationship that you have, in particular with the National Party. Now, I think across, you would certainly be aware of this too, David, you look across the Tasman and you see the relationship that has been there for 50 years, the relationship between the Liberal and the Country parties. It's not going so well at the moment, but it has done very well in the past. You used to be, in many ways, you were given Epsom. The National Party said, we want you to be that Member of Parliament. So there was a sort of a deal to make sure that David Seymour and the ACT Party was always in Parliament. Now you've made a very good job of being a leader, and your party has done extraordinarily well and seems to have reached a number of New Zealanders with your core values. And you've moved beyond just a simple being an economic and fiscal policy party into a number of social issues as well. Do you see this relationship, or the post-election relationship between National and ACT, as something that could have more permanence than just a 3-year term?
Well, let me answer that, but first let me just push back. You said they gave us it. Well, that's untrue. And first of all, it's factually untrue, but second of all, the way that you look at it is that somehow we're beneficiaries. Actually, we were entrepreneurial. We made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Vote for your own guy and you might miss out on government. Vote for us, you get an extra seat. So I think we've got to start looking at that for what it was. It's an entrepreneurial way to use the rules to get a better result, rather than this sort of slightly belittling view that other people take. But putting that aside, look, I think your question is, will it change the relationship? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on whether the National Party are ready to do two things that they haven't done before. One is that they need to share power and genuinely share power, and I don't know if they're prepared for that. They've never had to in the past. You've got to remember, these guys were in power for 38 out of 50 years, from 1949 to 1999. Their whole story is that we are in power more than 75% of the time when times are good. They're now looking at having to share power with another party. They've never really done it before. So that is the first thing. The second thing is they've got to be prepared to reverse Labor policies. And I like to challenge people to give me an example of a Labor policy that Nationals reversed. Now, some people say they got rid of compulsory unionism with the Employment Contracts Act, but it turns out that was a Liberal policy brought in by Dick Seddon in the 1890s. So I got off on one. But, I think that it's not clear how National will respond. All we know is that if they want to do business, then our strong preference is a tight arrangement of ACT and National sitting around the cabinet table implementing a plan to take this country that is inflationary, lawless and divided and make it affordable, safe and united again. That's what we want. I suspect that we're going to have to play hardball to get it, and it's possible they're not ready for that sort of relationship, and they might need 3 years as minority government with us on the crossbenches coming to us every Monday to say, what laws will you vote for this week? That'll be bloody tough and not our preferred option, but we're prepared to do it to get exactly that kind of rearrangement that you were talking about.
Well, yeah, which raises, of course, I mean, I know your views, David, on ruling out Winston Peters and New Zealand First. That's fair enough. That's well stated. I'm not going to debate or discuss that with you. Everybody's aware of that. But should they, and I know that you've put up this platform saying, oh, you know, beware the devil in disguise, essentially. But, yeah, you've ruled out dealing with Winston Peters and the ACT Party, or the ACT Party have with Winston Peters and New Zealand First. But if on the night Luxon is not ruling them out, do you have a problem with Chris Luxon, the game he's playing at the moment, not ruling them in or out, or do you accept that that is a decision for him to make?
Oh, it's a decision for him to make. I'm not going to hold it down to us here. I just point out that actions have consequences. So first of all, media get very excited about a couple of polls with New Zealand First over 5. They're not reporting that most polls still have them well under 5, and therefore you risk wasting your vote. People aren't really clued into that yet, but, it's still winning the wasted vote. The next question is, what would happen if Chris Luxon tried to do business with them? Well, you need a good reason to think it'd be more successful than, Jim Bolger or Alan Clark or, anyone else that's tried to do business with the guy, including most of his own caucus who don't talk to him anymore, even though he handpicked them. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And I just say to people, look, everyone's got choices, but choices have consequences. A couple of them are you might waste your vote. You might use your vote, but it might end up going into the left-wing coalition anyway, because if you listen carefully to what he's ruled out, he never quite says, I will never go with Labour. He always gives some qualified version of ruling out. Then there's just the fact that even if it all sits up, this government, this country is crying out for some real change. And why someone that's had so many chances before deserves another one's beyond me. But everyone has choices. I just point out the consequences.
People are aware of it. I mean, as distinct from the National Party at the moment, who haven't made a decision. They ruled him out prior to, which meant he had nowhere else to go, but this time they have not. And finally, I guess, your campaign, David. So as we know, it's a presidential campaign. You are it. You're the ACT leader. I know you've got excellent candidates. I've interviewed a lot of them over the last year. They stack up very, very well indeed, but unfortunately it's a presidential contest. What is your plan for the next 60 days? Is it you're touring, doing tiki tour in public meetings in a traditional sense? You're releasing policy, I guess, with press conferences and stuff like that. Is there anything different that we're likely to see from you and ACT that would defy that kind of tradition?
Well, look, not that I know of, but last time the campaign team decided to throw me out of a plane at very short notice. So I'll probably be the last to know if they have any stunts planned like last time. Got to say, it was quite good fun, but what I didn't realise is that the falling part's quite exhilarating, and then you just fall really, really slowly. So I'm sitting somewhere over Twizel, strapped to this other guy, and we're just floating, and it feels like we're barely moving. And he goes, "So, what got you into politics?" But anyway, look, we'll be out doing a lot of public meetings. If people are interested in coming out and participating in those, they're on our website, so please check it out. I mean, the crowds we're getting are just astonishing. And, it goes up quoting numbers, but 2 to 3 times bigger than this time a year ago, and even bigger still than what we got at the last election. One thing that's interesting is we're getting a lot of people at our meetings who are bringing small children, prams and pushchairs, and that's always a sign that you've crossed over, that, people who are pretty busy, have other places to be, trying to juggle kids and all the rest, but they're interested enough to come. So that's really positive, and we hope more and more people will come out to our public meetings because they're fun and we try to make them informative and useful. And then, there's going to be the TV debates, and we'll be putting out a lot of policy. Watch for what we have to say on Thursday night. I think there's an issue that's been brewing for a long time that someone needs to take on in a mature and articulate way. So hopefully the platform will want to talk about that
on the Friday.
So possibly Friday morning. Yeah. So look, all the usual stuff. It's just that we're getting. It's all the usual stuff. It's just that we're getting, all sorts of crazy propositions that the campaign committee might do anything to me this time. So watch this space.
Good on you. Hey, tell you, just one last thing. I get a sense looking from the outside, and I know sometimes you don't get that perspective when you're inside, but I get a sense from the outside that the media have turned. They've been, particularly the Wellington media, the best cheerleaders of this government, particularly for the last 2 years, maybe the last 3, ever since COVID, really. I get a feeling that they are more questioning, more querulous, more prepared to say that's wrong or you've made a mistake. Do you get that sense as well?
Yeah, and I think I know why. Jacinda's Labour was giving us, a nuclear-free moment, the end of child poverty, 100,000 houses, lots of kindness. Now, of course, we know, and some of us knew at the time, that was all just rubbish and was never actually going to happen, and she didn't know how to deliver it. But, man, she gave them a story. Now, today's Labour under Chris Hipkins say, well, we're going to mutilate the most efficient GST system in the world with crazy, changes that will deliver the average person 57 cents a week in savings, which is the real number, by the way. They're saying that they're going to increase your working for families payment, which is great if you're someone with lots of kids and low income, but for the vast majority of people, makes no difference at all. And then they say that they're going to give you more paid parental leave, but not for another 3 years. So, you've got to time your fertility for that one. It's not exactly exciting stuff, is it? And I think when the media don't have any breathless headlines to report, then the Labour Party becomes the story because they got to sell some sort of news each night. And, Labour run out of ideas, they run out of ministers, they've run out of other people's money, and that's now the story.
Look forward to your announcement on Thursday, and the best of luck for your campaign, mate.
Thanks, Michael. Bye.
Okay, right. That is David Seymour, ACT Party leader. I hope he answered all your questions. Mandates, you heard that. Winston Peters, you heard that. Candidates, you heard that. Polls, what ministerial seats they want. They don't want baubles. What I found interesting from that was that they're quite happy to sit in the crossbenches if things don't turn out well. So they'll play hardball. I'd play hardball too. I think most people who are thinking of voting centre-right at this moment have a choice, obviously, between National Labour. I guess some for New Zealand First as well. But if I was to sum up or summarise from the folk that I've talked to in the last 3 years as to why they'd be voting ACT, not National, it isn't because they expect ACT to be forming the coalition government or be its primary partner. It is to give some strength and steel to a centre-right coalition. So I think you would have heard that as well.